On the night of April 14, 1912, the largest ship ever built, the unsinkable Titanic, struck an iceberg and vanished beneath the waves of the North Atlantic. Over 1,500 people lost their lives in one of the most infamous disasters in history. But what if I told you the iceberg wasn't the only killer that night? The real story of why the Titanic sank is a complex and shocking chain of mistakes, bad luck, and human error. It's a story of a ship that was doomed long before it ever hit the ice. So, let's peel back the layers of this tragedy and uncover the full, unbelievable story. To understand what happened, we need to go back to the very beginning, to its construction in Belfast, Ireland. The Titanic and its sister ships, the Olympic and the Britannic, were designed to be the pinnacle of luxury and engineering. But right from the start, compromises were made. The ship's hull was held together by 3 million rivets. The ones at the bow and stern, the most critical areas for impact, were made of lower quality iron, not steel. Why? Because the shipyard's riveting machines couldn't reach those curved sections, so they had to be hammered by hand, and iron was easier to work with. Tests later showed these iron rivets were brittle, especially in the icy cold water of the Atlantic. When the iceberg hit, they likely popped open like zippers, allowing water to flood in much faster than it should have. Then there's the famous issue of the watertight compartments. The Titanic was advertised as being incredibly safe because it had 16 of these compartments. The ship could supposedly stay afloat even if 4 of them flooded. It was a brilliant design, but with a fatal flaw. The walls separating these compartments didn't go all the way up. They only reached the deck. Imagine an ice cube tray. You can fill a few sections. But if you tilt it, the water spills over into the next one, and then the next. That's exactly what happened on the Titanic. As the first 5 compartments filled with water, the bow was pulled down, and the water just spilled over the tops of the bulkheads, one by one, sealing the ship's fate. It wasn't a failure of the system. It was a failure of imagination. No one believed a breach this severe was possible. But a ship is more than just steel and rivets. It's also about the people running it. And here, we find another layer of this disaster. Let's talk about the crew. On that fateful night, the ship was racing through the Atlantic at a near maximum speed of 22 knots. Why the rush? Some say Captain Edward Smith was trying to set a new speed record on his final voyage before retirement. Others suggest pressure from the White Star Line chairman, Bruce Ismay, who was aboard and allegedly wanted to make a grand entrance into New York. Whatever the reason, going that fast through a known ice field at night was incredibly reckless. They were essentially driving a skyscraper through a minefield with the gas pedal floored. And they were doing it blind. The lookouts in the Crow's Nest, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, had no binoculars. The ship's binoculars were locked in a cabinet and the key was missing. The officer who had the key had been transferred off the ship at the last minute and forgot to hand it over. Could binoculars have made a difference? Absolutely. Fleet later testified that, with binoculars, he could have seen the iceberg in time to give the bridge enough warning to avoid it completely. It's a tiny, almost absurd detail, but one that had catastrophic consequences. Even without binoculars, there were plenty of warnings. Throughout the day on April 14th, the Titanic's wireless operators received multiple ice warnings from other ships in the area. Some were passed to the bridge, but a crucial one, from the ship Masaba, was not. It warned of a large field of ice directly in Titanic's path. Why wasn't it delivered? The wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, were employed by the Marconi Company, not the White Star Line. Their primary job was sending personal messages for the wealthy first-class passengers, which was a lucrative business. That evening, they were overwhelmed with a backlog of these messages. When the Masaba warning came in, Phillips reportedly acknowledged it, but set it aside, intending to deal with it later. He never did. The most important message the Titanic ever received ended up under a paperweight, forgotten. So, the stage is set. We have a ship with structural weaknesses, speeding through an ice field, with lookouts who can't see properly, and a captain who is unaware of the most immediate danger. At 11:40 p.m., Frederick Fleet spots the iceberg. He rings the warning bell 3 times and phones the bridge, shouting, "Iceberg, right ahead." First Officer William Murdoch immediately orders the engines to be put in reverse and the ship to be turned hard to port. It was the standard procedure, but in this case, it might have been the worst possible move. Turning a ship as massive as the Titanic takes a long time, instead of hitting the iceberg head-on, which the ship was designed to withstand. The turn caused it to scrape along the side. The iceberg sliced open a 300-foot gash below the waterline, breaching not 4, but 5, and possibly even 6, of those watertight compartments. The unsinkable ship was now guaranteed to sink. As chaos began to unfold, the final, and perhaps most tragic, part of this story began: the evacuation. The Titanic was legally required to carry enough lifeboats for just under 1,200 people, but there were over 2,200 people on board. The regulations were hopelessly outdated, based on a ship's tonnage, not its passenger capacity. The ship was actually designed to carry more lifeboats, but the designers felt the boat deck would look too cluttered. They prioritized aesthetics over safety. Even with the limited number of lifeboats, more lives could have been saved. The initial evacuation was slow and disorganized. Many passengers didn't believe the ship was actually sinking. It was the Titanic, after all. The crew, largely untrained in emergency procedures, launched the first few lifeboats less than half full. They were afraid the boats would buckle under the weight if fully loaded. A women and children first order was interpreted differently on opposite sides of the ship. On one side, officers allowed men in if there were empty seats. On the other, they turned men away, even when boats were leaving with plenty of room. As a result, hundreds of available seats went empty. The first lifeboat to leave, with a capacity of 65, carried only 28 people. And while the Titanic sent out distress calls, help was agonizingly close, yet so far away. The SS Californian was stopped for the night, trapped in the same ice field, only about 10 to 20 miles away. Its crew saw the Titanic's distress rockets, but their wireless operator had gone to bed just minutes before the Titanic hit the iceberg. The captain of the Californian, Stanley Lord, was woken up and told about the rockets, but he dismissed them, thinking they were just company signals. He did nothing. If the Californian had responded, it could have reached the Titanic before it sank, and saved hundreds, if not all, of the people in the water. So, why did the Titanic sink? It wasn't just an iceberg. It was a perfect storm of failures. It was the brittle rivets and the flawed bulkhead design. It was the reckless speed and the missing binoculars. It was the ignored ice warnings and the botched evacuation. It was the outdated safety regulations and the tragic miscommunication with a nearby ship. Each one of these was a link in a chain, and when they all came together on that freezing night in 1912, they dragged the greatest ship in the world to the bottom of the ocean. The sinking of the Titanic wasn't an accident. It was an inevitability created by human arrogance, greed, and a belief that they had built a ship that even God couldn't sink. The story serves as a powerful reminder that technology is only as good as the people who use it, and that overconfidence can be the most dangerous flaw of all. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what you think was the biggest single factor in the sinking. See you next time.